This is a video on how to install a harness bar in a McLaren 570S. This one happens to be a 2017 model. Supposedly this bar from FabSpeed fits a 650, a 570S coupe, a 540 coupe will not fit the Spider. So was really disappointed in FabSpeed that they don't have any instructions or any pictures of this installed other than the finished installation. So hard for me to believe a $1,500 product designed specifically for McLaren, there's no installation instructions. So you're basically on your own. This video I'm going to copyright for Performance Products Limited, which is the company I own that did this installation. It's for private use only. It's not authorized for any commercial use. FabSpeed should have done this a long time ago if they wanted to sell the product for $1,500. But basically where you start is you really need to remove your seats. It's going to be very difficult to work unless the seats are out of the car, and they basically unbolt. The next thing is this basically bolts on, if you can see, on top of the mount for the seat belt. You need to remove the panels, both this panel and that panel. You need to be careful. The clips are extremely tight on these panels, and sometimes when you pull them out, the clips will actually fall down in here. They'll stay in there and fall down. If you lose a little magnet, you can get them out. So basically, it uses this top seat belt bolt and bolts in. There's a plastic bracket you don't reuse. And then there's a bolt here for the rear. There's a threaded hole that already exists. It's an 8mm by 1.0 fine thread. The bolts that FabSpeed supplied, I didn't like. They were stainless steel bolts, no flange, no washer. So these are metric 10.9, 8mm by 1.0 that we used to secure it with some blue Loctite. Again, remove the seats, remove the panels. This particular car had P1 seats in it. The brackets that they supply are not going to work with these seats. They sit too low. So we'll do the brackets in another video. Again, be careful on these panels. We're going to show you some panel stuff now. So bear with me. Shop's a mess. So those were the seats that are in the car. We're going to do another video on how to mount brackets to get seat belts, both 5-point and 6-point on these seats. One of the things you've got to do is you've got to cut the panels to be able to, for the harness bar. And my suggestion is what we do is we make a cardboard template that we make sure it fits, measure twice. And then we basically mark the back side of the panel. We use an 1.5-inch hole saw to basically cut it out, and then we fine tune it with a Dremel with a sanding disc on it, and that's the way you get it to fit. We then take a hair dryer and we heat up the fabric, be it leather or Alcantara, till the glue starts to release. And then basically what you do is you peel it back and you cut out your hole, and then you take some trim adhesive, or what we use is 3M CR77 multi-purpose adhesive. You spray a little bit on, let it get tacky, and then put it on. Be careful, it's very sticky. And then we heat it with a hair dryer, so you know that everything's going to fit when it goes in there. So we're about to install the panels on one side. There's one thing I don't like. There's a small white plastic clip that fits right there. It always breaks. I'll have to get some more. I'll go to the local auto parts store. Sometimes this black clip will fall out. Make sure this metal clip is there. On these panels, these are extremely tight, and these clips are designed to hold it in there. So make sure when you remove the panel, sometimes the clip will either stay in the bracket on the car, or these clips will actually fall out and fall down. They can't go far. They're metal. You can use a magnet on the end of a pole to get them out, and make sure they're all secure when you go back in. So again, do a template, measure twice, cut once, and 1.5-inch hole saw is slightly undersized. We do that on purpose, and then we can use a Dremel tool to basically round it out and fit it. So more to follow once we get it together, and there'll be another video that basically is on the seats. The other thing I was disappointed is some of the bolts they supply are not correct. The bolts they supply for the seat, so when you use their brackets, and these are the brackets they supply, and they fit under the seat tracks, and because they're basically going to raise the seat up a little bit, you need longer bolts. The bolts in this car are not the same as what they supply. Now, I don't know if when they designed this early on that McLaren's changed the bolts that hold the seat down, but they're basically 8mm bolts for the seat. I think the ones they supply look like 10mm, so they won't fit. So we had to source extra bolts that are longer. But another video on the brackets. Again, unless you have some mechanical expertise and a lot of different tools and patience and want to start cutting into your upholstery panels, I'd suggest you find somebody that's worked on McLarens before to do it. So more to follow. So the bar is in, all the panels have been cut, as you can see. If the holes aren't perfect, you can always get a collar to cover it up, but I always leave a little space so if things move around, they're not rubbing on the bar. So basically, that's what it takes to get it in. Panels back, cut, trimmed. We'll describe the way the panels are cut later when we post some pictures. So let's talk about the seat mounts. So if you're going to mount standard seats, the standard McLaren seats, and you have enough clearance underneath, this is the setup you'd use. So in the rear you have the mounts for the lap belts, and in the front you have the mount for submarine straps if you're going to use those. If you're only going to use a 4-point, you don't need this front bar that bolts under the seat tracks. In the rear, one version has a bolt if you want to bolt it in, and the bolts for the seat belts actually come with the mounts. The other version would be an eye. Typically the eyes are supplied by the seatbelt manufacturers, Sparco, Schroth. I don't know if Simpson has them or not. So we're basically going to use a Schroth 6-point in this car. So we'll go over to the other side and take a look at the setup for the P1 seats. Because the P1 seats sit so low, you can't have the sub bar underneath the seat at the front. So it'll go all the way to the rear behind the seat. The sub belts will go under the seat, come there. And the P1 seat sits so low, it already has mounts made in the side of the seats for lap belts. So basically the shoulder belts will wrap around the bars. The sub belts will go to this bracket either there or at the rear. And then your lap belts will mount here if you have standard seats. P1 seats, there's provisions on there to mount them. I don't know about the center seats. I would assume because they offer those from the factory, there's a way to get them in there. So basically that's it for this version. Once we get the seats installed and the belts in, we'll come back and give you an update.